Hi everyone, it's Lana. Today's video is going to be the first part of 3 showing you how I make my little koi ponds. So these are just some that I had around my room. They're all, to most people these would be very small. They're quite big compared to how I normally make my koi ponds. But regardless, I'm going to show you how you can make them as big as these, larger or smaller, and how you do each part of them. So I know some tutorials can be a bit overwhelming when there's a lot of parts to it, even if an item looks fairly simple. So there, like I mentioned, there'll be 3 parts. Today's part is the first one, and that'll be showing you how to make the fish in the ponds. The second video next week will be how to make the pond itself and any of the little pieces that go in it. Now, granted, on this one, you can see some like little rocks and stuff like that. That wasn't that hard, but I'll show you how to make them nonetheless. And anything else like flowers, maybe lily pads, and little accessories that you can add in or outside of the pond. And the third video will be how to combine them all and put them all together. And the third video will be showing you how you take both the fish, the pond, and all of the accessories and how you put them together to create your own little pond. So to start off today's video, I'm going to show you the tools you can need not only to make the fish, but you'll use these to make the ponds, the accessories for the ponds, and when you're putting them all together. Is this tool. One end is this kind of arch shape, and then this one is just kind of pointy. Neither end is sharp, but that's why I like using it for all different things. I got this particular one off of Amazon in a sculpting tool set. The other thing, if you can't find it by looking up like sculpting tools, is it's very similar, I guess, to dentistry tools because of the different ends. So you could always look for that. The next thing is a roller, or at least something to flatten some of the clay. You can use a roller, the end of one of the other tools. If it's like a smooth outside to the tool, you can always use a pasta roller as well. But for today, I'll be showing you how I do it with this little roller. I have an X-Acto knife. You can use a knife like this as the blade, or you can use a larger blade like this. Because they're small, I like using the X-Acto. The next thing will be a dotting tool. So this one, this size is usually what I use, the smaller one. Either that side or this. But if I make larger fish, oh, don't mind the clay. If I make larger fish, I'll use this particular ball stylus, either end. The next thing for the fins and the tails, and for the, I don't know if it's considered a fin, but the thing over its back, that one. To cut those out, I like using little circle clay cutters. I have these 4 sizes. Now you don't need that many. Usually you just need 1, but I figured I'd show you a few sizes because depending on how big you make the fish, you can make the tail bigger, the fins bigger, all depending on how you want it stylized, or paintbrushes, or a paintbrush at least. If you're like me and don't want to get them dirty though, depending on how you add the color, you could use these other tools. So today I'm going to be showing you how to color the fish in 3 different ways. You can do it in other ways. Do one, you can always combine a few. It's up to you. It's a white translucent clay for the base of the body. This one is Cernit. You can use Premo. You could use Sculpey. I typically use Premo, but today I just had this. unlike regular just translucent clay, you can see the color a bit better and it gives more of a realistic kind of look to the body that regular translucent clay doesn't do. When I had first started out making the fish, what I normally would use was just plain white clay. So that is another option if you don't want them to be somewhat translucent. The next color you'll need is regular translucent clay. This one is Sculpey, but you can use any brand. This will be for the fins, the tail, and those like appendages on the fish. Now, for the eyes, what I normally use, because I make so many things at once and in different sizes, are micro beads, or sometimes they're called caviar beads. They're basically just these little beads that don't have holes in them. You could use clay if you wanted. You could always make them with black clay or whatever color you want. I've made some that had color eyes, and I thought that turned out really nice, depending on how you do it. They're apart the colors that you want the fish to have as their pattern. So some of the koi fish have all yellow all over their body, so you wouldn't necessarily have to use the white, or the white translucent. Some have like a red spot over their head. Some have the real common like calico color, so it's the whitish body, the orange and black spots. Some will have those colors with yellow spots, or just yellow and black. I realized I forgot one of the other items that you'll need is the oven bake Sculpey clay. It used to be called Bacon Bond, so if you find it like that. I'm going to show you 4 ways to color the fish today. I'm going to make mine a bit bigger so that way it's a little easier for you to see as I make them. But let's get started. So we're going to take this white color, cut it. Now for me, it could be where I'm in the US, but the Cernit clay is kind of dry. So I don't know if it's more like the kind of like shipment, whatever. But again, to show you how these all can look, I'm gonna make 4 big fish, and then in between there, I'll make some other fish or some other smaller versions. What you'll do is you'll cut up that base color to the size of the body of the fish that you want. So I'll roll these up. So now that we have them all rolled up, if you have fuzz in it, it could be from dust. Like for me, it's usually my dog's fur. But anything that gets on the clay, don't worry about it because you can clean it out. I know when I first started, I got really nervous because I thought you could never get it out, like fuzz or anything like that. You can. What I normally do is I use rubbing alcohol pads, little prep pads, once I have the body into the shape that I want. Now, you could use acetone. I personally just don't like it because the smell is too much for me. Sometimes at the end when they're done baking, I might use acetone, but I don't use that much of it. So what we're gonna do with the little balls of the clay is you're gonna take one end or one side of the ball. You're gonna put your hands like this into your hands until you kind of get a teardrop shape. So then you can kind of push the tail back upwards if it got a little too tapered down. You want the one end to still be fairly round and bigger than the end, like that. Now, what I normally do is I'll take the rounded end and lightly pinch like that to make the indents for the eyes. So then what I'll do is I'll take it. The tail isn't as pointy as I like, so I'm gonna roll that part out a little further. Can put that down. I usually like to form the bodies and take that teardrop shape, and you can make a slight curve while you move the tail. either to the left, to the right, or you can have it going straight. It depends on what you want to do with it, how you want it to look. Where I'll be putting mine in a pond, I want it to look almost like they're swimming. So I'm gonna turn it slightly like that. So what I'm gonna do from here is I'm gonna make the indents for the eyes. So I'm gonna use those flat parts that we made when we kind of squished it into our hand. From above, I'm gonna match where that is. Do the same thing on that side to make the eyes. This clay is getting kind of soft because I was rolling it so long. So the face, don't be worried if the face kind of gets a little smushed when you do that, because normally mine do too, but you can always fix it. And you can always let it rest for a period of time as well. So I'm just smoothing out the body. Like that. And I'll show you how I clean them. I always clean them before I add any other colors. That way the bottommost layer is clean while it still can be. Because once you add a lot to it, it's really hard to clean underneath. So I'm gonna go ahead and make the other fish into the little teardrop shapes and repeat what we have here. And then I'll come back when we're ready for the... And with this, you're gonna roll it out. I'm gonna move the fish. You're gonna roll it out to the thickness that you want or could work with. Fins and the tails, kind of like trial and error. I've done it so much, so based off these, I know that I'll need the biggest size. So I'll put these other ones over here. And I'm gonna cut out 3 circles for each fish. Sculpting tool, either end, and I just make stripes down the circles, go in one direction. This is just gonna give it some texture. So I'm gonna do that to all of the circles, even for the fins, even for the tails, the fins, all of it. Towards the end, we will need another circle, so make sure you still have enough of the translucent. But that will be another size. So, get that. Don't worry if the lines aren't perfect either, because most of them never will be, but you just want it to keep the overall round shape. So you're gonna go back with your cutter. I usually use the same size. You can make it smaller, bigger, whatever you want. And you're gonna carefully take off just a little of that circle. So I cut off, I don't know if you can see that, about that much. Okay, so with that, these will be the fins. So I'm gonna cut that in half. Now for this size fish, I'm gonna lightly press with my sculpting tool a little line, a little indent of where I want it. From there, I'm gonna take some of my bacon bond and then take the bacon bond, place some of it in that line. Now you're gonna want the flat part that you cut along the body of the fish. And then the round part that we made, that'll face towards the inside or the back of the body. Now lightly press it on. And then from the bottom, which is usually easier for me, or the side, you're gonna lightly start blending in that fin to the body. Now the bacon bar helps, but this will add another level of protection to keep the fin from falling off. Now, depending on your clay that you're using for the body, this process can make the body get really hot and warm, so it might warp the calf left over from the what was the fin or tails that's pretty thin. You're gonna take that and you're gonna lightly blend that on to the back. The tail, which now looks like this. The tail usually is the hardest part to attach just because of the size, the area. Bacon bond from it, and you're gonna lightly push some upwards onto the body and some downwards onto the tail while keeping it still in that middle part where they're connected. That way, again, it's more secure and holds on to the body a little bit better. So I'm gonna go ahead and add the fins and tails to the rest of the fish. And then, okay, now that all the fins are added, we can add their eyes. I always found easier when I would do faces with clay that I made the eyes with. I always liked pre-baking the eyes, which just means that you're baking it for a short amount of time, enough that they're not still like soft, but they've gotten firm because they've kind of started to cook. Today I'm going to be using the pan pastels, but I only just got these recently. You can use chalk pastels like the regular ones or whatever you have. Because these are soft, I'm going to use a paintbrush. When it comes to some of the other ways that you can color them, you wouldn't need them as much. Now granted, similar to most things that you do with pastels, whether it be chalk, like the sticks, or ones like these, this will be a lot less opaque than some of the other ways that we can color them. But what I like about this is it kind of gives it that underwater feel a little bit more, because it almost looks like watercolors. These are all the fish, by the way, are still unbaked. They haven't been baked yet. And the reason for that is for all of these techniques, especially this one, it helps the most for the color to really be able to stick onto the clay. And to have that, the clay has to be unbaked. So I don't go too far down the nose of the fish. I know some do actually have the color there, but not as many as they do like along the rest of the body. What you want to do is kind of just pat little, what I like to do is kind of do polka dots and then lightly fan them out and do them in a random order. You can kind of connect some, make little spots or lines in between them to have different levels of opacity. And once you like how it is with the whatever your lightest color is, whether that be yellow, orange, red, what have you, or if you want to do something a little fun, you could have it be, I don't know, yellow and purple or pink and orange and all different variations. But usually if you have one darker color, it makes it really pop. So like I said, if you had yellow and purple or something like that, you could use the purple or whichever one is the darker one already and use that as the special color. So I'm gonna, sorry for the noise. I'm gonna take a smaller brush so that way that I can use this orange, or this brush that I had the orange on it, for some of the other techniques and not kind of cross mix the color. So I'm gonna lightly tap into the black pastel, and if you saw what I was doing, I was tapping off the extra powder. So I learned that trick from all the years of watching makeup YouTube. What that does is help brush off or take off the extra powder and dust from your brush, so that way it doesn't go flying in the second you put it down. That way you can really try and build it up however you want. So what I'm doing is I'm just gonna add similar thing. You start out with a little dot and then just lightly build off the edges, and you can make a little pattern, a little shape. Sometimes what can be fun is, like, if depending on how big the fish are or how small, if you want to challenge yourself, you can do different little shapes. So like I've done some that have almost like a zebra print, which that, depending on how you do it, can kind of look like a regular koi fish. But I've done some with kind of star shapes, hearts, polka dots, like actual polka dots, so that way it does look really different. But you can do it however you want. With inks, I've noticed that one especially, you want to put it right away in the oven and bake it, because the longer you have the pigment settle onto and into the clay, it can change and distort the color that you originally picked out. So like I've had some where it worked, but like if I knew I wouldn't be able to bake them right away, I would use a yellow ink, because the longer that would sit on the clay, it would turn into almost an orange. But when I was actually trying not to have it do that, then it was a nice light yellow. I'd have some that I wanted it to be the regular orange and black color, but if I stepped away and had to go do something, and the color sat on it too long, the black would look blue and the orange could just look like a red or almost like a brownish, depending on which inks you use. We'll use the liquid clay from Sculpey. I have light orange and I have black. So in a similar way, well, I'm gonna shape this. We didn't have to do that with the pastels. I'm gonna pour some out. Probably didn't need that much, but sometimes it's hard to control it. And I do, when I swipe it off of my desk, I do my best to use it for other projects. So it's not like I'm just wasting it either. I'm gonna take a napkin. And this is just to get off some of that extra pigment from the chalks. Now granted, we're using the same color, so it's not that bad, but it's just the mixing of the materials that can kind of change how things look. Now this is one of the things that I was telling you before, that if you wanted, you don't need the paintbrush. These, because they have the liquid clay, you can use your dotting tool, you can use like a sculpting tool, like I was saying, like I use like this one, anything. But I'm gonna be using this. It's about using liquid clay for this, is that you can bake it, and if you want more, if you want to change the color, if you anything like that, you can always add on to it. Or if you're like me and sometimes you're like, I don't like the placement of that, you can lightly and carefully kind of scrape off the liquid clay or clean it off in some way, so that way you can kind of restart it. Well, nowadays with the liquid clay, I remember when they didn't have colored clays or liquid clays, and you'd either have to make your own by softening out regular colors so much, or you would have to add, which I still do every now and then, add pigments, whether it be chalks like we used before, or mica powders, when those, like, I remember years ago when I first started, everybody was talking about getting those. Or those, or glitter, or whatever. And you would mix it into the clear liquid clay. And it would bake on because it had the adhesive layer of the liquid clay, but it would have the tone and color of whatever, you know, pigment you put onto it. Which that is a really good, if you didn't know that, a tip that I usually tend to forget to tell people, because like I said, I still do that, but nowadays with having both colors and clear liquid clays out and available, you don't really maybe need that, but you can always kind of make your own almost. Okay. I think this one is done as well. Anyway, so this next one is the way that I had first made my koi fish, and had made them for about 10 years like this, which was you take regular polymer clay. I'm going to take a little of this coral color. I'm going to take a little of this orange. And some black clay. Cut it up so they're all about the same amount. I'm going to flatten them out. Condition them, flatten them out, depending on how soft or how firm the clay is. The pieces that you roll out, by the way, they don't have to be even, because you'll see why. I forget what made me first start wanting to make the koi fish, but I know one of the, or like what kind of made me think of the process, at least on how to do it. But I know around the time that I did start making them, I remember going to a pet store and with a relative and being so surprised. I thought they were toys, because I remember saying, oh my God, look at these. And those containers that they, I think it's so sad to see, but the containers that they have like betta fish in, where it's like almost like a food container. I saw all those here and I was like, oh my God, I want to get one. I didn't have room. I already had a hamster. We had a dog, whatever. But you know what it's like if you see one that's real cute, real pretty. But anyway, that, and I wanted to save them all from being in those containers. But on a not so sad note, that's when I saw the very first, it was the very first time I ever saw a koi fish in real life, because they had 2 or 3, like 2 of one, you know, either 2 males, 1, they were all in separate containers, but it was something like that. There was like 3 of them, like I said, and each container, like the other containers, was a koi fish, and they were about the size of these. And I thought that was so cool, because I thought I remember always seeing like the artwork, different koi fish and stuff like that. So I always kind of, like, I knew they were real, but I always kind of thought they were fake too, because they looked so pretty. So that's why I was like, oh my God. So being bummed out that I couldn't get one for my room as a little kid in an apartment, I had, like I said, I think it was one of the reasons why I did start making them in clay. Along with all the other ones, all the other animals that I make now. So, with these colors, you're going to take your ball tool or a stylus, whatever you want to call it. You're going to take, I usually start with the bigger end first, but you're going to, I think it's stipple, but you're going to make little dots on your clay, and it's going to start to look like a golf ball. And along the edges of the clay, I usually go on one side at a time, makes it easier. And you're going to keep pressing until it gets really, really flat. And then once you get it to a nice evenish layer, you're going to take your other end, do that same thing, and when you start seeing it get so thin out in certain spots that it looks transparent, kind of pull at it towards you, and then it should break off into little pieces like that. Now you could just kind of rip the pieces off, but I like doing this because it adds texture. And then all you can do is add it. Like I said, this was one of the first ways that I ever thought of or learned. I don't even remember at this point how to add color to them because I didn't have all the supplies that I'm very grateful to have nowadays to add color to them. So I do this all the time. I think we're all set with the colors. Yep. This one is the technique that I use the most often over the last few years. And it's using alcohol inks. So I don't have any more of a black alcohol ink. So the only thing I have is an acrylic ink. So what I would suggest is if you're in a similar situation, or maybe you only have acrylic ink or paint, I would suggest doing it after you bake it. Because in my opinion, in my experience, if you had acrylic ink or paint on clay before it gets baked, but I do have a coral and a yellow, so I'm going to use those. Now, similar to what I was saying before, they do change color the longer they sit on the fish. Now, I chose lighter colors than orange and red because, one, this is what I have, but I don't plan on baking these right away because I am too tired. So, keep that in mind. Quickly, before it dries out, you lightly dab the color on. Now, granted, with these, because of how quick they dry, because of the color, I'm adding it into bigger spots. You don't have to. You can make it just as small as the other kind of colors that we did, or techniques rather. But, I don't know. For me, it looks cute because the longer you let it dry out on the surface, which if you're using just your plain desk, don't ruin your tables. I don't want any comments saying, oh, I ruined my table. I didn't tell you to do that. But the colors look more transparent and translucent. So they'll, I don't know, it just gives it a different look. And the other thing too is with doing the yellow first, if we add the coral over it, that'll mix and become orange color itself. I'll bake these in the morning, and then once they're done, I'll show you how they turn out. We can add the black ink, and we're ready. Then we'll be ready for their ponds. All right, so our fish are out of the oven and done. This one here is the liquid clay. I like how it turned out. The orange is a lot softer than I was expecting on that one. This is the one we did with the various colors of clay. I like this one because it does remind me of all the ones that I first ever made. This is the one with the pastels. I like how light that one is. And then this one got a bit of the liquid clay in the back, but this is the one with the inks. With that being said, I hope you all had fun if you joined me in making some fish. And I hope to see you again next week so you can learn how to make a pond for these little guys.